everyone, and thanks for having us here today. I'm Lindsay Ellerby. I'm the VP of Product and Design at Flybits, which is a platform that helps banks leverage data to deliver personalized, more contextual and relevant customer experiences. So I have about 2 decades worth of experience in user experience design, product design, in human-centered design. In business strategy and innovation. I'm very excited to be moderating this panel today of terrific individuals. So first, I'm just going to do a quick introduction, and then we're going to get into our topic. So we've got Eric Feige at the end there. So Eric is the managing director at vShift and an entrepreneurial digital strategy leader with transformation track record within the financial services, healthcare, technology, and professional services organization. He has held global head of digital roles for JP Morgan Private Bank, Prudential Financial, KPMG, and Deloitte. Hey, Eric. We have Joanna Pena Bickley, founder and CEO of Vibes AI, an AI pioneer, board member, and keynote speaker. Amazing roster here, alumni of Alexa, AWS, Amazon, Uber, IBM. So Joanna is a design engineer and is known as the mother of cognitive experience design. She is a pioneer in AI-aided generative design, and she is propelled by multidisciplinary acumen in research, design, technology, and media. Wonderful. We've also got Chris Mckay sitting right next to me. So Chris is the CEO and editor-in-chief of Imaginative. It provides high-quality AI news, education, and training around AI literacy and advisory and coaching. Through Imaginative, he bridges the gap between AI research and practice and inspires and educates business leaders and professionals on how to adopt and use AI effectively and ethically. So, wonderful panel for us today. Super excited to get into it. So, our topic today is around customer experience and AI. I think that we've heard from previous panels today a lot of great themes around this. I think we all know that AI is disrupting traditional customer relationships and really the experiences of how people interact and engage with brands, products, and services. Whether it's smart agents focused on customer service or NLP being used to make interactions feel more natural and human-like, or predictive models being used to anticipate customer needs before they know they have them. We all are familiar with these experiences. So the interesting thing here, I think, for us is that AI isn't new, right? This current wave that we're in has allowed for new interfaces and experiences and access to AI and the benefits of it. So what does this really mean for brands and businesses delivering customer experiences across multiple touch points today? To kick us off around this topic, we have a sort of key message or a key theme that we've been chatting about, and that is that people don't want to buy things. I think Rizwan said it earlier, people don't wake up and say, I need a bank today. They wake up thinking, man, I need to start saving for my kid's future. Or, a parent doesn't say, I want to buy a minivan. They think, I need to ferry my kids from A to B efficiently, safely, and I also want to still be sort of cool while doing it. So when we think about customer experience in the lens of AI, we need to be thinking about the emotional and functional outcomes, or in the world of design, jobs to be done, that these experiences need to be providing. So this is kind of a central theme that we've been discussing a lot. So when we think about AI being embedded into every aspect of a customer journey, from awareness to onboarding to ongoing usage, what does that mean for the customer experience? So I want to start with Chris. When we think about embedding AI into customer experience and we think about generating good outcomes for people, what should we be aware of and concerned about around that customer experience?
Sure. Thank you, Lindsay. I think that's a great question. I think for many businesses, as they think about delivering experiences that will ultimately succeed, the first thing that they'll want to think about is literacy. AI is relatively new for the general public, right? They're being introduced to technologies that for many of them, it's exponential compared to what they had before. And so being able to spend time educating the user as they go along the journey is important. And the example I like to use, and it's not just AI, it's that of spell check. If you think of early devices, you had spell check, and if you wrote a word wrong in Microsoft, it would underline it with the squiggly red lines, and it would say, hey, this word is spelled incorrectly. And then a few years later, you had autocorrect, where after time, Microsoft built up enough trust with its users, and it said, well, we'll just correct the word for you because we know that's what you really meant to type. And they would still put a blue line that you could undo the change if you wanted. And then, of course, you had autocomplete with mobile devices. You're swiping away. You don't care if you're misspelling it. The device doesn't care. They'll correct it anyways, and you just move on. But that trust happens over time. And it means educating the user throughout that journey and doing a couple things. One, ensuring that they're in control. So they'll know, hey, if I want to undo this or if I want to make a change, I'm not subject to the machine, and the machine isn't the one defining where this goes. I am. And I think for many users, for many companies, spending the time to gain that trust and build it is going to be important. Sometimes businesses will ask us, well, will people want a device to be recording everything? And I say to them, that will come over time. You can't introduce a device and expect somebody to trust it immediately. There has to be that ramp up of you educating them as to why you're doing it. You have to establish trust to know that the data that you're using in your models are reputable and ethically sourced. You have to establish trust in knowing that the content that you're generating has a certain level of accuracy that they can depend on. And so it's not so much about, hey, does the device output have to be right all the time? But did you inform the user as they're using it to say, hey, we have a 35% confidence score that this response is accurate, or we have a 95% score, because the user is going to react differently depending on what you say to them.
Mm-hmm. Excellent, thank you. Joanna,
Yeah, I love that kind of framing up of it, and I think there's kind of the answer to this question kind of comes twofold. First, when we think about the customer journey, I think that often companies think about it something that happens over time. Thanks to, I think, where we are in the zeitgeist of all of our technology, it happens in seconds. Like, this is no longer, it's 3 days to like open up a bank account or to buy a car, right? I recently just purchased an electric vehicle, and it took me less than 5 minutes.
Wow.
So when we think about the customer experience, right, the time to task has actually been significantly reduced. To the part around building trust, and all the years at and Alexa, as we were talking about backstage, there was a lot of learning. You know, the things that she could understand in the beginning were far less than the things that she could understand today. And I think that this is about developing that relationship so that, particularly in the area of when you're thinking about AI assistants and then your brand being represented as an AI assistant, knowing where do you actually first have permission to go in someone's life. And then the second part is actually outperforming, right, in that role.
Yeah. Yeah.
You know, so many times we think there's going to be one ubiquitous AI. What I would tell you is that those of us who've been at this for a little bit would tell you, no, there's going to be lots and lots of agents that you're going to interact with. It's really how the system has been designed. And so when we think a little bit about building that trust, you have to actually use designed mechanisms. Number one, actually, most people do want to have some kind of information about what is the data that you're utilizing. So it's called corpus sourcing, right? You talked a little bit about confidence scoring. Well, how reliable, if I've asked the system a question, pretend it's healthcare or even in banking or automotive, how reliable is the answer that I'm getting, right? And I think there's a lot of different ways to do this. And that's how you begin to build that incremental trust over time. I think my biggest critique of a lot of the AI systems out there today, they don't do those things. It's a little bit of a black box. And I think that's one of the cognizant things that we have to be aware of. In the world of Alexa, a lot of times when we were doing work with her, you believe me, everyone tries to ask an AI everything. Alexa experienced during the pandemic, like just an increased heightened questions around, will you marry me, right? That tells you how lonely we were as a society. But that would be, you have to kind of anticipate that, but you also have to create boundaries around what your corpus of data actually knows or that you have understanding. And it is okay for your AI to say, I don't know. Matter of fact, I don't want to ask Alexa how my heart's doing. I'd really like for an AI that is trained in the domain of some of the best heart surgeons in the world to tell me how my heart's doing. And so I think we have to understand that I think we as consumers and as constituents, because I refuse to call us users, we shouldn't be creating products that are addictive. But we should really be focusing in on what's our superpower as a brand or a company, and then be able to do that incredibly well. And then you can start inching out into the adjacencies.
There's one other thing I would like to add to that. And that's over-indexing on the technology itself.
Yeah.
I think there are many companies that, like, they saw ChatGPT and they're like, every experience needs to be a chatbot. And even design products you're seeing where they're trying to shoehorn a design solution in a chatbot experience, and you're like, you can't throw out proven design principles, user-centered design education that we have developed over the last 2 decades just because there's a new technology. And so I would say for many companies, it's important to ensure you're bringing your designers to the table now more than ever. Don't just think you need to adopt the latest, most capable model, throw it at a product, and you're going to have a golden goose.
Well, to your point, right? It's like if you look at OpenAI's interface, it's 1960s, command line interface versus Perplexity, which is at least the 1990s,
yes.
Right? So at least, as we look at this from an interface perspective, the ability to think about these things from a multimodal perspective, I think is really important.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely.
And Eric, if you want to chime in around the business side of this, and sort of we've talked about some of the customer experience outcomes and design outcomes, especially in highly regulated industries such as finance and healthcare. What are some of the business outcomes and drivers as well?
Absolutely, and I'd love, and I'll rip off a couple of this, including constituent versus user as being at the center. So when adoption of new winning customer experiences, either supported with AI or not, and it's very exciting what's coming, is when the business goals of the product organization or the branded company, their business goals extend into the customer, right, into the constituent. And often in healthcare or financial services, it'll have to do with the wellness of that constituent or that consumer. So what I love at the operating committee, the executive committee, is this notion of a healthy insured policyholder is a profitable policyholder for healthcare. Same thing with wellness or savings that you and I have talked about. And so marrying up the business objectives that formerly might have been conversions or hard dollar metrics and extending it to the human value, the wellness, and the condition of that constituent, critically important for the data scientist as well as the designer as well as the product owner to work in harmony together. From a best practices going back well over a dozen years, and we've all touched on it so far, Chris, with literacy and leveling up. There's 3 principles of a body of psychology that works exceedingly well for customer experience that cascades into the great innovation going on in AI right now, and that's self-determination theory. So 1, mastery, that you're only going to engage in the customer experience if you feel confident and that you have a level of literacy, and that the customer experience is flexible enough to bring the content from the LLM, from other sources in the language. And we have a lot of good evolving models that can pick and choose and swap out so that the human and the constituent is getting a personalized experience at scale. So that's mastery, education, literacy, and so forth. Another one is relevance. Lindsay, you had mentioned this as well. Why would you save? Well, we know that extrinsic goals don't work. Intrinsic motivating goals of what you do and what you value intrinsically will move the needle. It'll allow you then in the customer experience and the data and the AI to conspire in your benefit. Mastery, relevance, and lastly is autonomy. And we touched about this with trust. So autonomy and engaging in a customer experience is what you said. You don't want to be sold to, but it's of your own volition. And you've developed a sense of trust. And often within the organization, the big brand, that's one of the biggest barriers when I work with data scientists and technologists, is that it's too much about the technology and the model. Yep. And we have the same problem with user experience, which is losing sight of the constituents' needs and having an internal debate on the methodology or the rigor of the research. This is quite a significant risk for the AI community to be so inwardly focused and not focused on the mastery, the relevance, the autonomy needs of large constituents at mass.
Yep. You know, one of the things that we were talking about, and I thought that was a really interesting one, is some of the most successful companies in the marketplace today that have the greatest stock prices actually have already adopted that philosophy. Yep. And you know, what is exciting to me is particularly within the area of health and wellness, is that you're beginning to see an understanding that they've got to bring together, that the business strategy and the user experience strategy and the technology cannot all be separate things, but they've got to actually come together. And then the metrics for success are actually similar. Yep. Right? And we think about it economically, right? Today, if we think a little bit about like companies that are doing incredibly well on the bottom line in the area of AI, that yes, are actually understand the details needed for the technological advancement, also understand what the importance of customer satisfaction, have already kind of made this jump into focusing less about what I call GDP, right? That's a business and a countrywide, right? And moving to quality of life indicators. And you can monetize quality of life indicators in a manner in which is you get repeat usage, and it is upon repeat usage that you actually get monetary value and wonderful return on.
Yeah, and if I could, Lindsay, go back to the rate of adoption and some of the barriers. I think there's a couple of things, and I kind of heard this last night at the event at the Quinn House, which was great. And this notion of big tech and monolithic all-in-one systems versus modularity or composability in AI, as well as customer experience, digital technology. And that granularity of being able to pick and choose, where I've seen with the adoption is to say, well, we're going to do it of the strategist, the P&L owner, the CMO, designers that are ambidextrous, Gurvinder, taking from your language of being very facile, of a designer being able to understand and communicate with a data scientist of which models, how do we change the customer experience so that the language choice is more comforting? How do we assess the literacy level so that we can get them to the next level of mastery? Because that's all going to deliver the outcomes for the business.
Yeah, absolutely. And just thinking a little bit about design, you know, throughout my career did human-centered design. It's very important, of course, to always be thinking still about human needs. What I see as an evolution from human-centered design, just kind of getting back to what we're talking about around relevancy and connecting to really true, you know, human experience, is that people have changed, right? Yeah. So we got products and services 10, 15 years ago that were very much like echo chambers. And if you think about social media and how it was designed, we can break out of what that idea of personage is. We're like cyborgs. We carry around supercomputers in our back pockets. We're different, we have different needs. There's so many opportunities to create new and different experiences that go beyond the traditional human-centered design kind of echo chamber. And so I was curious to ask Joanna about this idea of multimodal design or products, services, experiences, really, and especially like multi-sensory and some of the things that you're seeing that you're really excited about when it comes to that.
Thank you for the question. So there's a lot going on in this. And I think that over the last 15 years, we kind of really only focused on the visual input. And visual input has actually led to significant cognitive overload, right? It actually, when you get down to the science of it, is an enormous contributor of why we have an epidemic of loneliness in our country and in the world right now. So the importance of multimodality is super important. Today, I actually happen to be wearing a prototype of our Vibes AI product. And here's an example of when you think about the human senses, that you don't think about just the computer senses. We think computer vision, right? And then it's got, you've got bioacoustic sensors, things like that. But it actually says when you marry that up with the ability of the actual sensory computer that I have in between my ears, right? And this is much more about augmenting the human. Then we have an opportunity to start exploring form factors. And when we think about that and delivering a multi-sensory customer experience, right? Bringing this back to why do you want to do it, to the wellness conversation. Today, we are actually working with the Alzheimer's Association, right? And the Alzheimer's Association interest in our particular product is because when I am able to control my hearing, right? Any type of hearing loss at any age actually makes you 8 times more likely to have dementia and Alzheimer's earlier, right? And this has nothing to do with being predisposed to it. So if we're able to get into the area of prevention, right, by shaping our sensory input is, I think, a critical thing. So I think one of the things that we're going to see, right, as native AI devices begin to proliferate, right, we think about the original native AI device as being a lot of what was actually put into form in this particular lab. Second to that was the Alexa devices that's in 100 million homes, right, connecting billions of devices. Now what we're seeing is from companies like Humane, my company, Vibes AI, right, and Rabbit, right, with the R1, are new native AI devices. And those new native AI devices are multisensory. And so I think the excitement around them, I mean, we're having an AI hot girl summer, right? After many, many menopauses, right? But I think the acceleration and acceptance of those devices is coming at a time when we talk to customers. The reason we got into this space was because people are actually looking for solutions to having to be addicted to a screen to actually get anything done. And so when you can kind of pull your head up, right? The first experience of being human is raising your head and connecting with things in and around you. And the technologies that enable us to do that are going to be the ones that actually enable much richer, healthier experiences that really, I think, resonate, but also have a bottom line result for companies. These two things are not mutually exclusive. In my years at Amazon, just for perspective, one of the, I think, genius things that we understood about what Jeff meant was when you become customer obsessed, that means that obsession comes down to, do we have the customer trust? And when you do, that repeat interaction is going to happen and you monetize that. But you want to ensure that that's a healthy interaction.
Yeah.
I want to add something I think very important. This is a journey that you're on with the customer. And as AI is changing, the customer is also changing. We were on a podcast at Imaginative a week ago, and our guest, Trip Clemens, he said, if you think of a couple years ago, you saw the Will Smith AI-generated video of him, and everybody was so blown away by it. And now looking back, it was so obvious that it was AI-generated. Yeah. If you look at even VFX effects in movies that you watched in the past, that you were blown away by Avatar and what they were doing, and you look back and you're like, oh, it's so obviously fake. The important thing to recognize is that we are learning to detect AI, to detect AI-generated content, to generate certain habits now when it comes to how we interact with our devices, how we interact with AI overall. And you're also seeing AI bring new things that allow us to learn about ourselves. You have tools like Hume AI that are able to detect emotion from the words that you're saying and the tone of your voice and the pace at which you're talking. Yesterday, you saw the new electric Atlas from Boston Dynamics, and you saw how different of a design that represented from its predecessor, but also from other competitors on the market. And so you'll see AI evolve, but your customers are also evolving, and it's going to be important that you consider both of them as you're building products and bringing them to market.
Well, remember, the last best experience you have anywhere becomes the minimum expectation
True.
of what you expect everywhere.
Across the board, yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
And so I think this is what has kind of created a space race, right, to the best customer experience. Right?
Yeah.
Because I remember in the days of the work that in just ride hailing in New York City, right? The minute you didn't have to stand on the corner in Harlem waiting and waiting and waiting for a taxi, right, was a game changer. Your time to task, immediately, time and safety, those two components, right, were a game changer. Whether you were, I think one of the early writing services was called Halo.
Halo, yeah,
and then there was, and then there was Uber, and then there's Lyft. And as you look at those things, you go, okay, that. People talk about it being disruptive. Yes, it may have been disruptive to the market. It wasn't disruptive to me. I could all of a sudden get from A to B and do so like that. And I think that's the way that we have to look at it. I think something you talked about, and I think this is a really important one, is we talked about customer trust and we talk about this, but I think this part about evolution, right? And that we as humans are not static beings.
Yeah.
Neither are our customers. And I will tell you, one of the largest adopters of Alexa devices in the early days was people over the age of 65. Matter of fact, we were so good at it, SNL spoofed us. How many of you saw the SNL? I thought, you know what? When SNL has spoofed your product, you've done something right. You've made it, right?
Yeah.
But to that part, right, is that when you understand is that the first thing that you release isn't going to be the last interaction with it. If we all remember, go back to what our iPhone could do. Remember, it was a phone. You could play music on it.
Send messages.
You couldn't send messages, and you could browse. If I remember, there wasn't even an app store. There was zero app store on it. So we look at that, and here we are at the beginning. I look at today, and somebody said, what will you do with your Vibes AI? I said, well, today it's a phone. It's helping me hear the world better, and it's got some wellness features. But will that be what it is tomorrow? Absolutely not. We have great vision for it. And I think it's about understanding that once you create the expectation in the marketplace, it's incumbent upon those of you in the innovation space, even with heavy regulation, because in working in health, even with the regulation, that the importance of bringing everybody around the table, enabling them to experience those things, and getting them engaged in the process of invention is actually how you move the ball forward.
Hey, Lindsay.
You go ahead. I was going to ask, we can close on this, but I was going to ask about feedback loops. We've talked a lot about the symbiosis and the kind of relationship between the human and the machine, and that we're constantly evolving with the technology. We learn it, it learns us. I want to come back to this idea of the human in the loop, feedback loops, and how we make sure those are baked into the experiences. But Eric, did you want to chime in there?
This is related to human and data streams and more revolutionary versus evolutionary. I do think in enterprises, there's this notion of AI coupled in really nice harmony with CX, with customer experience, to really reveal new business models, new strategies. If you look across an enterprise in insurance or wealth management or what have you, and you're able to incent internal folks involved, employees that are involved with delivering stellar and innovative customer experience, and you can reach an agreement to consume and ingest their data and compare it to other models, I do believe that we're going to see kind of a flip of AI data models and very niche long tail CX informing business strategies. Unfortunately, probably a lot of cost containment as well of do we need as many humans if we can model and automate certain better practices.
Well, we're already on that journey. Let's talk about the elephant in the room for a second, okay? Look, just having been in the tech business, right now, generative AI is already being adopted as almost a GLP-1 antagonist to corporate America. And you used to need 10 people to do something in a particular department, and now there's 5. If you look at the latest rounds of layoffs, particularly within tech, so often it's come after at least 5 years of a tremendous amount of dog fooding of their own technologies. And so I think that as we start to think a little bit about this is that I think we're effectively, even in the big enterprises, moving from this idea that you need large enterprises to everything, and we're actually fundamentally going to a lot smaller, agile teams in those areas.
And tech and non-tech businesses have vastly different kind of codes of operation. So,
right, but we're seeing it in what I would tell you is financial services is already toying with it. As we look at it, you see it in both on the financial services, because those are business models that are actually based on resiliency as opposed to adaptivity.
Right.
Excellent. Okay, so I think it's time for us to wrap up.
Yeah.
I wanted to say thank you so much to Chris, Joanna, and Eric for joining the panel today. Some great themes around trust, around the symbiosis between humans, machines, humans in the loop here, creating great outcomes for people, and how do we do that in multimodal, more connected ways. So thank you so much for the conversation.
Yeah.
Great.
Thank you.
Thank you.